Republicans like Burr have now moved from obstructionism to outright sedition. What they're doing now with the Supreme Court, is insurgency by other means. It's political terrorism. And it's yet another example of how their party has moved outside the mainstream of American politics into the fantasy land of reactionary politics. But while the right's blockade of the nation's highest court gets all the headlines, it's just one way that they're laying siege to our court system and our democracy. Their war against the judiciary is a two-pronged attack, and it has as much to do with the shadowy world of dark money as it does filibusters in the Senate. Joining me now to explain how it all works is Mike Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire, host of America's Lawyer, and author of the new crime thriller Law and Disorder. Pap, welcome back.
Tom, how are you?
I'm great, and it's great, and I'm better because you're here. So, Mike, describe for us what's going on here. What is this two-pronged attack Republicans are waging against the judiciary?
Well, it's both Republicans and Democrats. They've been using the Supreme Court talking point to help pull in voters, telling us to imagine how horrible the court will become if the other side wins. And with Republicans now sensing a defeat coming next week, they're already working out ways to prevent a liberal or even a moderate majority of the Supreme Court. As you pointed out, Ted Cruz, McCain, Burr, all toying with the idea of leaving Scalia's seat empty for the next 4 years. They don't want Hillary to appoint anybody with a brain to the Supreme Court. Is that sedition? It borderlines sedition, and it probably has almost zero chance of really holding out here. The Republicans are telling us that they're just not going to do their job for 4 years, just like they haven't been doing their job, Tom, for the last 8 years. Merrick Garland, you remember that guy? Well, he still hasn't been given a hearing on top of the 59 lower court appointees that are still waiting on hearings. In total, we have 102 lower court seats that are waiting to be filled. And I can promise you that Ted Cruz and his gang of thugs will perfectly be very happy leaving those seats empty for the next 4 years. But they have a problem.
And the problem is?
The problem is they don't quite understand that at the Supreme Court level, it sometimes hurts them worse, hurts the right wing a lot worse, not to have a court that simply can't take action because they're either in a deadlock or they simply don't have that majority to pass these kind of odd things that are coming out of Texas and Alabama and Mississippi. Lately, what's been happening, Tom, is you have the fringe that simply seeks out the lower federal court to come up with some harebrained idea that changes the existing law that typically exists in that jurisdiction. So here's what happens. It goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court typically can't take action because they don't have the majority to do it, or it's a close call. And what ends up happening is the old law stays in place. So to some degree, the irony is that the right-wing neo-nuts who are so worried about keeping the Supreme Court like it is have really dampened the ability for the fringe state by state to go forward with their fringe ideas on what the laws should be for a particular jurisdiction.
Well, considering the role Citizens United has played in making this flood of dark money possible, is it too conspiratorial to think that this was the plan all along, even if they are kind of Keystone copying it?
Well, here's the real problem. On Tuesday, 27 states will be holding elections to determine the next justices on their state Supreme Court. And you know what? Corporations, largely through totally untraceable dark money donations, have poured more than $14 million into those judges' elections. It's an attack on the judges that are unfriendly to them. So we don't even know. We look at a commercial. We don't even understand where the money's coming from. Is it the Chamber of Commerce? Most of the time it is. Most of the time the Chamber of Commerce dresses up the money that they use to get their henchman judge elected. And it is always the Chamber of Commerce. If you follow this story, it's always the Chamber of Commerce that is kind of the director for this dark money moving into these various judge elections. And you know what? They expect paybacks. And truthfully, when they do get their judges appointed, most of the time the quality of judges they they have appointed are really not even trained lawyers or judges. Few of them even sit on the bench for any long period of time. Most of the time, they come from a background of political hacks, and when the Republicans need to call on that political hack to make a ruling on something like abortion or gender or climate change, they go to that political hack after they're appointed. The problem is, and just like I said, when it gets to the Supreme Court, which it usually does, they don't have a court that is in place to be able to verify that as law throughout the land. So it's an interesting development, but the dark money problem is a big one.
So, you know, one of the circuit courts that correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that the Republicans have been refusing to put President Obama's appointees on as the Fifth Circuit. I mean, there's courts up and down all over the place where there's openings. That's the most conservative court in the United States, and so they're throwing cases at the Fifth.
Absolutely. And
then the Fifth rules in some crazy way, let's say right-wing way, conservative way. It goes up to the Supreme Court. It comes back 4-4, which means that the Fifth stands. So they're functionally the Supreme Court, at least with regard to that particular case. Does that mean that only in the states that are covered by the Fifth Circuit, like we've got, two sets of laws for different parts of the country as a consequence of this?
Well, you have that anyway, Tom. That exists anyway right now. The Fifth Circuit has always been a dismal disappointment to consumers and mom and pop out in America that really are always the victims to things like Wall Street scams or bad drugs or defective products or environmental catastrophes. So what ends up happening is the Fifth Circuit, you can always count on them siding with corporate America. That's always been the case. Not much really changes in that regard. The point is, we believe that all we have to do, the average voter out there says all we have to do is worry about the White House. All we have to do is worry about that senator we want elected. It doesn't make any difference if the court system is overriding any kind of laws that are passed by favorable progressives or even moderates, because the judiciary, as you point out, does make the law of the land. And if you live in a place like Texas and in Mississippi, or the area where you're going to have to contend with the Fifth Judicial Circuit, you got a problem. There's no question about that. They have been building this machine for a long time. While most progressives have been talking about how important the White House is, think about this. Obama is under attack still every day for Obamacare. And where does the attack come from? The federal judiciary, because they've packed the courts. And right now we're going to be victims of that for quite some time.
So, Mike, what strategically, how do you think the Democrats should react to this?
Well, strategically, the Democrats should make this a priority as far as worrying about federal judge appointments. We're spending what's $300 million that Clinton raised for a presidential election. We ought to be taking a large part of that and worrying about the judiciary far more than we worry about the top of the food chain in this particular turn right now. Look, they have taken, as we've talked about before, they've taken Howard Dean's idea of locality, state by circuit, by district, and they've used that theory to pack the courts with judges that are nothing more than political hacks. Few of them are really judicial in the way they approach a case. They're more political, and that's what the Republicans want. They want a political process in the judiciary, just the same way it would exist in D.C., in Congress, or the Senate.
In the minute we have left, is this any variation or connection to the idea of nullification? I mean, this constant obstruction of the Supreme Court?
There's always been a goal of nullification. As soon as Obama took office, they understood that we saw it with Obamacare. If you'll think back, we saw it with environmental issue after environmental issue, where they say it doesn't really make any difference what this president does, either through an executive order or even through Senate action. We can nullify that if we have a judge that says it's unconstitutional, and then you have to start over again. Let me give you this caveat, though, Tom. This is maybe a surprise to you. The judges that have been appointed by Obama are really not that much better than the judges that were appointed by both of the Bushes. If you look at their politics, they come from corporate silk-stocking law firms. They are raised in corporate mentality, and they're really not very good for consumers across the board.
Yeah, remarkable. Mike Papantonio, it's always great to have you with us, Mike. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Tom.